In an effort to relieve ourselves of personal responsibility for our destiny, many of us grope for excuses. We are eager to blame someone or something else for our lack of success. Almost every one of us at some level is guilty of this form of rationalization. Our finger-pointing may be blatant, as in the case of the individual who blames his lack of success on the fact that his mother didn't breastfeed him when he was a baby. Or it may be more subtle, as in the case of the man who vaguely says, "I never had a chance." In each example, both individuals are blaming someone or something else for their failure to reach their full potential. It would be naive to contend that others do not have a profound effect upon our lives, especially in the early years. But as we reach adulthood, we should become more and more aware that the influences which were exerted over us in our youth should no longer have a direct effect upon our adulthood decision-making processes. Nevertheless, it's a convenient crutch that we frequently carry with us into adulthood. The excuse, "It's all my mother's fault," is replaced by, "It's all my spouse's fault," or "It's all my boss's fault," or "It's all my children's fault." In an effort to improve the extent to which we realize our full potential, we must not start from a foundation of incidents that occurred years ago. Nor may we start from a foundation of rationalization, which recognizes others in our adult years as being the primary moving forces in our lives. We must return again to that guy in the mirror and accept him and love him as he is, intent upon improving him consistent with his full potential. Others may take too simplistic an approach and announce boldly that our past experiences and thoughts should have no bearing whatsoever upon our ability to make rational decisions now. Others contend at the other extreme that we are totally locked into a course of conduct and thought which is totally predetermined by our previous experiences. I suggest a middle ground that proposes that our past will control our conduct and thought unless we use all the current rational abilities we have to program ourselves in another direction. There is a huge difference between saying that we are the products of our past environment and saying that we are the victims of our past environment. The former implies that there are certain past incidents and thoughts that, when multiplied together, produced the current us. It doesn't foreclose that other factors may be added to the formula and thereby affect the product. The latter statement implies that as a result of past incidents and thoughts, we are locked into a mode of behavior over which we have no control. You know, we can become deeply philosophic at this point and explore the advantages of the free will school of thought as opposed to the concepts of determinism. But such talk is, pardon the pun, academic. For even if the system creates merely the illusion of control over one's destiny, that illusion is better than no control at all. But enough of this heavy-duty philosophizing. Suffice it to say that if you're a non-productive, self-demeaning chump, it's not your mother's fault. It's your fault. Many of us spend our whole lives waiting for our ship to come in, even though we never sent one out. We regard our future as a diffuse blob with no real boundaries or parameters, just a vague, distant destination where we'll wind up one of these days. We read in the paper or see on TV news of great accomplishments or happenings and say, "One of these days, that'll happen to me." And then we wait and wait and wait for something to happen. The sensation that life is passing us by is a very real sensation for most of us. We have all, at some time in our lives, experienced the feeling that the world is proceeding its merry way without our direct involvement, and that it will probably get along quite well even after we've left. In an effort to throw ourselves back into the mainstream of events, we frequently established hurried and ill-defined goals. Occasionally written, but more often not recorded anywhere, these goals, as we call them, are more like wishes than concrete and specific decisions regarding our lives. And still we sit and wait for the world to beat a path to our door. We wait for things to happen to us rather than us happening to things. We regard our life as carrying us toward some distant destination rather than us causing our lives to reach that destination. We abdicate control to fate and, despite the lack of any specific image of what it is we want to become, and despite any effort on our part to reach our goals, we are content to sit back and assume that things will come our way one of these days. If it is the clear establishment of our goals and the acceptance of our responsibility for pursuing those goals that are the primary ingredients for avoiding the one of these days mentality, then why do we so often neglect to set specific goals? I think it's because we fear failure. We fear failure. You know, the greatest defense in the world against failure is to not have a goal. There's no way we can fail if we're not trying for something in the first place. Failing to set specific goals, then, protects us from our fear of failure, because if we never quite decide what it is that we want, then, when we don't get it, and we won't, we can always say, "Oh, I didn't want that anyway." You know, there's a name for that. It's called the "I didn't want to win anyway" syndrome. And we see it all around us every day. We see it in the man who didn't get that promotion. "Oh, I didn't want to move up in that organization anyway." We see it in the family that can't afford that vacation. "We thought we'd just stay home this year." We see it in the lawyer who didn't win his case. "Oh, the client was probably guilty anyway." And we see it in the salesperson who didn't make that sale. "Did you get any orders today?" "Yeah, 2. Get out and stay out." In short, we see it in all of us every day. Of course, where we most frequently see the "I didn't want to win anyway" syndrome is when it comes to money. Sometimes it seems like there's only two kinds of people on this earth: those who have a lot of money and those who say, "I didn't want a lot of money anyway." Now, if your goals don't happen to include having a lot of money, that's fine. There's certainly nothing wrong with that. But what really burns, well, that part of me next to which I normally keep my wallet, is when I hear people regard money as something unwholesome, unhealthy, unclean, something about which those who have it should be ashamed. Some people will tell you money can't buy you friends or health or happiness. Well, they're talking about Confederate money. It's money that builds our churches and synagogues. It builds our hospitals, feeds our hungry, houses orphans, and gives families time to spend together. Saying that money is something less than that is just another way of saying, "I didn't want to win anyway." But whether we're talking about setting specific financial goals, or work goals, or home goals, or inside goals, or outside goals, the fact is most of us don't have any real goals at all. Just vague notions of what it is we want to have happen to us instead of what it is we want to make happen. And day after day, we too often plod along, ignoring that we haven't made anything good happen, but thankful that nothing bad has happened to us. And we just keep saying, "It's all going to come my way one of these days." The lyrics of a recently popular song provide, "It's all right now. I've learned my lesson well. You can't please everyone, so you got to please yourself." By assuming control of our own destiny, we are bound to get someone angry. Maybe it'll be your boss who currently has you pegged into a neat little role you no longer wish to assume. Maybe it'll be your spouse who will be at least temporarily uncomfortable because you no longer fit the role of the relatively insensitive and uncaring spouse he or she has come to know. The chances are good, for example, that if you bring home flowers to your wife for the first time in 20 years, she is going to want to know who you've been seeing on the side. But she'll probably adjust, and so will your boss. In the meantime, by pursuing your own specific goals, you'll be working to please yourself directly. Your own critical evaluation process must deal with the extent to which you can begin immediately to please yourself by establishing your own priorities and seizing control of your own life. It can be, especially at first, a lonely process. Suddenly, the only image you must live up to is your own. Suddenly, the voices from outside, which used to either cheer you on or hold you back, are irrelevant. Decision-making becomes your own responsibility. Results become your own responsibility. Your action or inaction become your own responsibility. But if we have spent the better part of our lives trying to please others, then it is entirely possible that we still lack a firm notion of what will please us. In the next cassette, we'll discuss the three-step formula for establishing personal priorities. But first, we must take another few minutes to get as close as we can to number one. There is another song which provides getting to know you, getting to know all about you. Suddenly there we are, intent upon asserting our own individuality, intent upon managing our own conduct in each of our 4 mini-environments in such a fashion that we will reach our full potential as individuals. Yet, we may have no clear idea of the direction we genuinely wish our life to take. In fact, our ability to assess the direction that will please us most is inversely proportional to the extent to which we have spent our lives previously trying to please others. We must establish direct and unobscured communication with the innermost soul of that guy in the mirror. We often hide from ourselves. We dilute that sensitive communication system between our innermost feelings and our outermost actions. We act and think and talk in a manner not entirely consistent with what's going on deep inside. It was Bill Cosby, I believe, who once suggested that many of us hide from ourselves through the use of alcohol and drugs. Every time we hear that little guy inside trying to catch up with us, we drown him with a shot of bourbon or space him out with a barbiturate, so he won't give us any problems or ask us any questions we may have difficulty answering. A lot of us don't want to meet that guy in there because we're afraid we might not like him, or worse, because we're afraid he might not like us. But he is the real us, our innermost feelings and thoughts. There are a number of devices, such as prayer, contemplation, and meditation, which can help us get in touch with that little guy, and it's important that we try. For whatever our outermost thoughts might say, it is only the deepest of impulses that can help us conclude what will truly make us happy. Many Eastern religions are, in particular, noted for their emphasis upon this effort at reaching the innermost self. Some speak in terms of chakras, others speak in terms of increased levels of consciousness, and many methods are used to reach these higher states. Without ever having deliberately attempted to do so, many of us have simulated, to a very small extent, these efforts. The devout dieter is a good example. He quite literally fasts, not in an effort to heighten his consciousness, but in an effort to improve his waistline. But frequently the dieter will experience a sense of heightened consciousness simply because his body, with less food in its system, suffers fewer distractions. Under such circumstances, thoughts frequently become more coherent. Lines of reasoning become more complex, and revelations about oneself, however minor, frequently occur. Once, when I was very broke, I decided it was time to go on a diet, mainly because I couldn't afford to buy groceries. I fasted for several days and then existed for about 2 weeks on small pieces of lean red meat and eggs. I didn't own a TV, and my only radio was broken. In my apartment, the only 2 pieces of furniture were a chair and a bed. At night, I would sit in the chair, sip water, and stare out the window. I lost a lot of weight during those 2 weeks, but more important, some of the best writing I've ever done flowed from the thoughts I had during that period. Incidentally, I do not recommend fasting as a device to achieve heightened consciousness except under the supervision of qualified medical professionals. That little guy inside, the one we usually drown out through overeating or overdrinking or with the sound of a TV, is usually a pretty nice fellow, and he has our best interests at heart. Getting to know him is usually a far more pleasant experience than we would expect. I recommend that you explore, through qualified and experienced professionals, meditative techniques by which the two of you can become more intimately acquainted. Getting to know ourselves is frequently fun. It can result in a heightened level of self-esteem, which has been defined as the degree to which we feel warm and loving toward ourselves. Lilburn S. Barksdale of the Barksdale Foundation has defined this phenomenon of genuine self-love as total unconditional acceptance, TUA, of self. As such, TUA is a natural byproduct of getting in touch with and establishing meaningful rapport and meaningful dialogue with that little guy inside. In the book, Stand Up, Speak Out, and Win, William J. McGrain defined TUA as the realization that you are a unique and worthy individual, regardless of your mistakes, defeats, and failures, or your human frailties and real or fancied shortcomings, despite what others may say, think, or feel about you or your behavior, regardless of your great accomplishments or lack thereof. It stands to reason that TUA is a natural prerequisite toward effective goal setting and toward turning loose the enormous potential that we as individuals possess. For unless we as individuals can accept the notion that we are worthy of all that we wish to accomplish, we will continue to be our own worst enemy by holding ourselves back. Look again in the mirror. There he is, your very best friend. There may be others whom you love, many I hope. There may be others who love you. But it's that guy you're looking at who always has been and always will be your very best friend. When my son was very small, I frequently asked him, "Who is your very best friend?" He'd always respond by providing the name of one of his playing companions. The name would vary depending upon who he had seen the most of during the past several weeks. But then I'd always ask again, "But who's your very best friend?" We repeated the exercise many times until the answer became apparent to him. Ask him today who his very best friend is, and he'll say, "You're looking at him." I hope it's a lesson he'll carry with him for the rest of his life, for it's one of the best this Father has to offer. Know thyself, the prophet said, and he meant it. Show me an individual who is in touch with himself and who has clearly established priorities in each of the 4 mini-environments of his life, and I'll show you an individual who is, by any definition of the term, a success. That guy in the mirror. Number 1, numero uno, the chief enchilada, the main man, the boss, the nominator and nominatee all rolled into one, that superb and unique package called you. Let the self-fulfilling prophecies of others fall upon other ears. Let others wait for permission to begin. Let someone else blame the rest of the world for the successes they have not achieved. And let others talk of one of these days. For you, it's all right now. You're getting to know you. You're meeting that little guy inside, and you can accept him totally, unconditionally. And why not? He is the best friend, the very best friend you'll ever have. Let's travel now to a place called the Siesta Motel to discover how, with your brains and his help, the two of you can utilize the enormous potential at your disposal.